Hi everyone, my name is Dr. David McKinney. Welcome to this seminar on writing in college, and also welcome to UCD. Writing in College What's Different is a seminar which is designed to provide you with some strategies to approach the challenge of writing in college for the first time. You'll then hone these techniques throughout your time at UCD. These are general guidelines for approaching essays and assignments, but remember that there are differences among schools, so do ask your module coordinator if you're in any doubt how to approach your particular assignment. So one of the most commonly asked questions at the beginning of the year is, what is expected of me in college? How is it different from the writing that I may have done before? The first thing to note is that the standard of writing in third level is higher than it is for the Leaving Cert. And this is for various reasons that I'll come back to in a minute. It's important to remember as well that structure matters. If a piece of writing is well structured and features consistent argumentation, it is more likely to be a better assignment. Remember that academic writing is a different skill than you may be used to. It's not journalistic writing, it's not personal response writing. The task of the academic writer is to persuade the person reading it that the position they've taken, the claim they're making, is a valid one, and that it is valid because the person who has written the essay has done an appropriate amount of critical thinking and independent research. You will, though, hone these skills as a process throughout your time at UCD. It won't really be the case that it will click in second or third week, but you will consistently hone and get better throughout your time at UCD. So some patience really is required. So, if academic writing is different, how is it different? How is it different to the writing you've done before? The first way in which academic writing is different from writing you've done before is because you are required to do some of your own independent research. You also need to provide an argument, which is the through line of your whole essay, which binds the whole essay together. You'll also need to do a deeper level of analysis. This may be quite a lot deeper than you're used to from, for example, the Leaving Cert, in which you have to produce answers to exam questions under time pressure. Language is also something which is very particular to academic writing. It's a formal, detached, almost scientific register which allows for a greater level of authority and a greater level of more forensic clinical analysis. Remember as well that you have to reference in academic writing. If you take an idea from somewhere else, you must acknowledge that that idea came from somewhere else, and you must tell the reader where it came from. So one of the first ways in which writing in college is different to writing you may have encountered before is that there is much more onus on the student to conduct their own research outside the classroom and outside the textbook. In school, you may have been used to getting information in core textbooks or handouts or presentations given by the teachers. This meant that the classroom was the place really of learning. But now, the onus is on you to take the core ideas from classes and go and explore those ideas in a much wider context. And this is where the library in all its forms comes in, both in terms of the wealth of digital material available and the wealth of physical material available. So the library is at your disposal. There's such a huge amount of material in there which will be of a great deal of help to you throughout your time at UCD. Here though, on this page, there are some guides which will help you find the right, appropriate, reputable academic material to improve your coursework. So do check out these individual guides by following the link. And remember that well-researched writing is always better writing. So how else is an assignment in college different? One of the other main differences is the art of the argument. In particularly essays, your writing will take a particular position. It will make an argument. It will have a central point or claim or proposition around which the essay is based. Also, while Leaving Cert exams reward the demonstration of knowledge of the topic, third level writing demands analysis. You must argue the why. You must make a point and do as best analysis as you can in order to demonstrate the validity of that point. So analysis really is the key thing. Remember that there are no marks going for summaries or plot description. For example, in a film, you wouldn't just describe what happens in the film. You would analyse particular symbols in the film. In history, you wouldn't just say what happened between the years 1930 to 1940. You would analyse the significance of those things. Writing needs to be analytical and must have an argument which underpins the whole thing. And that's really one of the crucial elements of difference between Leaving Cert and college writing. College writing is also different because you will be expected to independently engage in your work with other research which has already been carried out. Many of you will be taking courses which are introductions to things, and these are very well studied areas about which so much has been written. So you include those ideas, you incorporate those ideas into your essays to demonstrate that you know about those ideas and that you have a critical understanding of those ideas. Really, this is engaging with research and reading around the subject area. And it's part of being the academic community. And this is a system in which ideas are shared, critiqued, and improved. Your essays then will be part of an ongoing conversation about a particular topic. Really what you're doing is you are contributing your own perspective to a particular subject area. So having read and thought about the available perspectives, what is your perspective on the particular topic you're writing about? So you need to inform yourself about your subject before you start writing about it. And this is the gathering material stage. And this is done before you start writing your essay proper. This is the research stage. So the best way to come up with ideas is to read what has been written already. And this is why the library is so important. Often with assignments, so much reading material can be overwhelming, especially when it's a very well-studied subject. And it can be difficult to find your own voice, what you think in everything, what your perspective is. So the best thing to do when you're answering a question, an essay question or assignment question, is to start with a separate blank page and write down in bullet point form what you want to argue, what your answer or perspective is on the question. Then underneath it, make points about what other people have written about the subject. This means that you can see your original thought and then you can see the maturation of this thought because you have informed yourself on the subject to the best possible extent. So once you see your original thought qualified by the research, you will form an argument. And this argument, this central perspective, is your point, the point to your essay. And this is your thesis statement. Remember, though, that your sources must be of good quality if your essay is going to stand up. The evidence, if you like, must be solid. So in third level, wiki pages and CliffsNotes style websites are not admissible as sources. These are study guides, and some of them can be edited by pretty much anyone. So since they're not academic sources, they are not admissible. So do not use Wikipedia, CliffsNotes, GradeSaver, etc. Instead, if you're using online sources, use accredited organisations, ones ending in .edu or .ac.uk. Use books and peer-reviewed articles. Peer review is a very important academic procedure. Before somebody publishes an article in a respected journal, 2 or 3 academics will review the article first. They then suggest some edits or recommend that the paper be published or not. So as a result, there's some quality control in place that there isn't with websites like Wikipedia. So do use good quality sources for your assignment because they will strengthen it. So how do you know with an online source if you find an article whether or not it's of good quality? Well, first of all, is it from a reputable journal? If it's something like Cambridge University Press, it's going to be of good quality. If it's attached to any university press, it's going to be of good quality also. If you find it through the UCD library portal, it's also going to be of good quality because UCD has seen to invest in it. If it's a peer-reviewed article, that's a very good sign too, because it means that it has the benefit of academic expertise. See if the author's name is present. The author might be one person, it could be a group of people. But if the author's name is not present, it's generally a bad sign. Make sure that it's not an unreliable source. Wiki pages, blogs can be changed by non-experts at a moment's notice. So these are not reliable sources. So how do you construct an argument in an essay? Well, an argument is a position or a view that you're taking in relation to the question asked of you, and you'll use the essay to prove that position. You'll use your powers of analysis to prove that position, the validity of that position. This should be clearly outlined in the introduction of an essay in the form of a thesis statement. So your argument should be made clear as soon as possible, really, in the essay. Take some time over this. Try to make sure you know where you're going from the beginning of the essay. Your argument really is your direction. It's your coordinates for the end of the journey. Your task throughout the essay is to prove your argument with reference to the text in a fluent, lucid manner. So here's an example of an essay question which has been posed, and also an example of how an argument can be carved out of that essay question. So the question here is, by choosing to make the main hero of her Harry Potter novels a boy, J.K. Rowling only continues outdated gender stereotypes. Discuss. So somebody has taken a position on this where they have really disagreed with it, and they've said why, and it's the qualification, it's the same why that provides the essay with direction. So this essay argues that J.K. Rowling actually subverts the old stereotypes where boys are brave and adventurous while girls are passive and fearful. In fact, she succeeds in making Harry a very imperfect boy with feminine qualities and completely lost without Hermione's guidance and intelligence. So it's disagreed with the central premise of the prompt in the essay question, but it's also qualified it. It's asked why a couple of times and has therefore strengthened its position by becoming more specific. Here's another example which shows that you really can answer questions like this in a lot of different ways. It's possible for a class of 30 students each to have totally different approaches to this question, none which is more valid than the other. So this essay argues that J.K. Rowling's main hero is a boy for a reason. So it's agreeing with the central premise of the question. Rowling makes a deliberate link to other well-known boy characters in English children's literature, like Oliver Twist or Peter Pan, who overcome obstacles and go through life without parents to guide them. So it's agreeing with the premise, it's not disagreeing, and it's qualifying the position. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's just clarity of argument. That's the important thing. And if your argument is clear, it's going to encourage you to do more specific analysis, which will support that precise argument. So some problems arise when there is no argument, there's no thesis statement. The problem really is that there is no direction for the essay. So this is an example of a thesis statement that needs quite a bit of work, because the thesis statement says, I agree with the above statement that J.K. Rowling continues outdated gender stereotypes. It doesn't say how or why or what the effect is, it just agrees with it. And as a result, there's not enough to this. There's not enough direction provided by it. And consequently, the essay will likely never really fully come to fruition in terms of its argument. So in summary then, why is the thesis statement so important? It gives you direction. It provides you with coordinates for the end of your journey. It also makes it clear for the reader and the writer what the assignment is about, where it's going, what its purpose is. A well-constructed argument is the basis of a good assignment, and your assignment is also more likely to be analytical, because to prove a specific point, you're going to need to do some specific analysis to get there. So analysis is important. But what makes an assignment analytical? In short, it's moving from the what to the so what. So, when you're describing something, you state what happened. But when you're analysing something, you identify the significance of that event. So, for example, World War II started in 1939. That states what happened. But you have to identify the significance if you're doing critical thinking. So you could say, well, what was the significance of the Second World War? Well, it was the most bloody and destructive war of the 20th century. That's analysing a fact. That's looking behind the fact. The second category states when something happened. Analysing it means identifying why the timing is important. So the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. Why is the timing important? Well, it signified the end of 30 years of isolation. The last category notes the method used, and analysis meaning indicating whether the method is appropriate or suitable is particularly important for social sciences and for sciences as well. So, for example, in sociology, if somebody arrives at a particular conclusion, you can look at the method by which they arrived at that conclusion. Did they do a survey? Did they do a questionnaire? And if they did one, would another method have been more authoritative? Would it have been more beneficial? So a checklist here of some things to make sure that you do in an assignment. Use a detached, neutral tone. Make sure not to be informal or too overly emotive. Have an argument in mind as you progress through the essay or assignment, and ask yourself, am I answering the question? Particularly helpful to do that after a paragraph is to read over it again and think, am I answering the question? Use paragraphs. Remember, 1 point per paragraph, and your point is outlined in the topic sentence, the first sentence of the paragraph. Make sure the paragraphs have a logical flow, that as they flow into one another, they tell a story. A good structure, a logical structure, makes an essay much more persuasive. Also check your school's policy on line spacing. Some schools may say 1.5 line spacing, other schools may insist on double spacing. So do check your school policy on that. So here's the overview of an essay. This is the helicopter plan of the essay. Now, some examples I gave earlier were from literature, but the advice I'm giving here in terms of structure is beneficial more broadly. So you will often need to have a thesis statement. You'll need to have a central argument. If you're in business, it may be about proving whether or not people can be managed. If it's in nursing, it may be about the best way to avoid hospital infections. So the discipline, the format is still the same. But the introduction of an essay will have some context at the beginning. You'll have some general information, some general statements about the topic, but then you'll get to your thesis statement, and then you'll list the ideas within your thesis statement, the major building blocks of your argument. And each one of these building blocks corresponds to a paragraph, and each paragraph begins with a topic sentence. And the beginning of the paragraph is a topic sentence, which is much like a thesis statement for that paragraph. So each paragraph begins with a sort of a mini thesis statement. And then the final paragraph, the conclusion, is a brief summary of the main points of the essay. But also try to restate your argument in another way. Try to restate your thesis statement. Because remember, it's your last chance to leave an impression on the reader. However, make sure that you do so in a formal and detached way without being too emotive. Now, individual paragraphs comprise two elements: a topic sentence and discussion. So as I was saying before, the topic sentence is the first sentence in a paragraph, and it's like the thesis statement of that paragraph. It contains a point, and the rest of the paragraph is there to discuss or validate that point. So here is a paragraph from a fictitious essay on sitcoms. So the first sentence is the topic sentence. It makes the point of the paragraph. Television sitcoms generally incorporate similar narrative structures within episodes. So now we know this paragraph is making a point about narrative structures within episodes. So now we'll read on and it will unpack that statement. At the beginning of an episode, a central subject for the episode is introduced, which is closely followed by a conflict. While the attempt to resolve or avoid this conflict provides the opportunity for comedy, embarrassment, lying, slapstick, the episode's closing scene, often signalled by characters embracing or laughing, reassures the viewer that the conflict which came before has been resolved, major consequences of the central conflict have been avoided, and the characters have learned something from their experiences. So that's now a well fleshed out idea because it's been introduced and then discussed to its logical conclusion. So your essay should be an authoritative, persuasive and objective piece of writing which presents your argument in a concise manner. So to that end, avoid informal language. Anything that sounds like everyday speech, avoid it. It weakens your writing. So phrases like it's sort of like or this is a bit like. You really want to leave those out of your writing because it can weaken it. Avoid personal statements as well unless they're specified in the question. Phrases like I believe or in my experience. These are things to leave out as well. Avoid contractions. Remember to write the full words. So you would write does not rather than doesn't. There are some other important things to avoid too. So avoid cliches. Phrases like since the dawn of time or throughout history. They're unoriginal uses of language and quite ineffective in writing. So leave them out. Also, avoid overly general statements. Phrases like all cancer research is underfunded. It's very difficult to really validate that within the scope of a relatively short essay. So be circumspect about the claims that you make. Also avoid appraisal. So if you're writing an essay about an artist, you don't describe that artist as a genius because that just distracts from the central question and introduces unnecessary subjectivity. Avoid using I as well unless it's a reflective piece or your lecturer specifies it. Try to prioritize analytical material. That is, make sure that your essay isn't just a list of events and facts, but rather that you are analysing the significance of those events and facts in as best a way you can. Make sure you know your school's policy on word count as well. Some schools will allow you to go 10% over the word count, others won't. And this obviously varies from school to school. So do make sure that you know your school's policy on it before you submit your assignment. You'll also notice that there are some important differences in language from the Leaving Cert to third level writing. So in secondary school, you may be used to using the first person. College, you'll be using the third person. Again, it's a more formal, detached kind of writing. Secondary school, you can be more personal, especially in your English paper. In college, however, it's more detached and informed. Even more, if you like, scientific. In secondary school, you can be a little informal in writing, but in college, we're looking for formal writing. In secondary school, you can be general or a little bit vague. One of the reasons for this is that you have such a limited amount of time within an exam to produce an essay or a piece of writing. However, in college, you need to be more specific and precise. And that's one of the reasons why you have comparatively longer to do individual essays. So language is another key difference between school and college. It is a different set of rules, if you like, but you will learn them and you'll hone your use of them throughout your time here. It's possible to have a very good idea, but with the incorrect phrasing, it doesn't reach its full potential. So the first sentence here, I believe that sustainable energy is the way forward, contains the kernel of a good idea, but it's not specific enough, nor is it phrased correctly in accordance with the correct academic language. So, if we change it a bit and unpack it and make it more specific and more formal, it is much more effective. So I believe that sustainable energy is the way forward changes to sustainable energy has been scientifically proven to be the cleanest and most efficient model for industry. So instead of I believe, it has been proven, and then instead of the way forward, it's the cleanest and most efficient model for industry. So we unpack and then we make more formal. That's, I think, an important process to make sure that you undertake in your writing. It's also very beneficial for your writing to be as specific as possible. So, this first paragraph says, soon the symptoms became more interesting while also difficult for the medical team. So, that's quite vague, but there is the kernel of some sort of knowledge there. But if we unpack it a bit, we can say, instead of soon, we say by day 7, the symptoms, and we qualify that by saying what they are, which now also included difficulty swallowing and a rash, became more varied. So instead of more interesting, we have more varied, thus making it difficult for the medical team to reach a final diagnosis. So we even unpack what difficult is there. So this is an important habit to get into. It's to check to see if your writing is specific enough. And you can always go back over your writing, go over a paragraph and see, okay, well, have I picked that apart enough? Have I expanded enough on it? And that's the sort of thing that we can certainly help you with in the Writing Centre. So a little bit more on the main differences between secondary school and college and the purpose of assessment. In secondary school, you're being tested on knowledge and understanding of a topic. However, in college, we really sort of assume that you already know the material, but we want to test your ability to critically engage with the topic. In secondary school, your understanding and opinion are supported by examples and quotations. But in college, your claim and argument are supported by analysis and evidence. So it's a deeper form of analysis, and there's much more critical thinking involved. It's also much more evidence-based, and it's much more based on persuasion through analysis than understanding or opinion that you might have encountered before. So it might be helpful to think about it as a little bit more scientific in its ethos. Referencing will be quite a new idea at this point as well. Referencing sounds like quite a big idea, but really all referencing is acknowledging ideas that are not your own in your assignment and stating their origin in accordance with a particular prescribed protocol. So, really, most of the time what you need something within the text to say where the idea came from, whose it is, and where you can find it. And then the details, the full details of that text at the end of the assignment. In academic writing, it's vital to cite all sources, by which I mean it's vital to label all ideas which are not your own and say where they came from and who wrote them and where you can find them. Every school has its own policy on citation and referencing, which means that every school has its own particular format that it requires for referencing. And these formats have different names: Chicago, MHRA, APA. There are several different kinds. Just make sure that you are using the correct one, the one that's prescribed by your school. There are two purposes behind referencing and citation. Academic integrity, which means that we don't take other people's ideas and don't give them acknowledgement for it. It also shows, though, that you have read and engaged with other relevant material in the area of your subject. So you are also doing something for yourself, which is showing your examiner or the person reading your essay that you have done some important critical engagement with the material of your course. The library website also has some very, very useful resources on correct citation and referencing. So if you go to the library website, and if you go to Study Skills, Referencing and Plagiarism, you will find some very useful resources on Chicago, MLA, Harvard, MHRA, APA, all of the styles of referencing. It also gives you some very useful examples of how that referencing works in practice. So you can use these as templates until you get used to the correct style of referencing. We can also, of course, help you in the Writing Centre with correct referencing styles. So what if you follow all of this advice and you still find that you're disappointed with your grade? Maybe you're a student who's used to a certain grade and you found yourself scoring below that grade. First of all, don't panic. Writing is a craft and a process, and you can't expect to be perfect at the beginning. To some extent, academic writing is a little bit like a new language, and it does take, obviously, a bit of time to become conversant in that language. We are here to help at the Writing Centre. So if you get some feedback on an essay and you want to know where to improve, do bring us that feedback, and we can go through it with you and devise ways in which you can improve. You can also, of course, bring your essay in before submission, and we can work with you on it and figure out what you need to improve on and how you can do that. You can also come to us if you haven't yet started to write your assignment, but are in the drafting phase of thinking about how you might approach it. You can read about us or make an appointment on our website, ucd.ie/writing centre, and we'd be glad to see you anytime. Thanks very much for watching. My name's Dr. David McKinney, and I wish you the best throughout your time at UCD.